Some women enter a room and the atmosphere changes instantly, even before they say a word. You know the kind. The ones people turn to look at without knowing why. Not because of beauty, money, or fame, but because their presence refuses to go unnoticed. Carl Jung would say it's the moment when a woman stops fighting her inner world and begins to command the outer one. But here's the shocking truth. Most powerful women weren't born confident. They were born misunderstood. They were told they were too emotional, too intense, too much. And for years, they believed it. They shrank. They softened themselves into invisibility. They worked twice as hard just to be half seen. Until the day they realized, confidence isn't something you wait to feel. It's something you decide to become. Have you ever wondered why some women barely speak, yet somehow everyone listens? Why some walk in quietly, but it feels like thunder just rolled through the door? Why their eyes alone seem to hold entire stories, ones people ache to understand? What awakens such power inside a woman, and what makes others instantly feel it? And here's a deeper mystery. What if that same presence is sleeping inside you too? What if the world hasn't ignored you? It just hasn't met the version of you who knows her own worth yet. Stay with me, because once you discover what truly makes a woman impossible to ignore, you may never again be able to hide the force you were always meant to become. There's an invisible language she learned to speak long before she understood it. It's the quiet communication of confidence, one that whispers directly to the unconscious mind of everyone in the room. She doesn't need to raise her voice or chase attention. Attention naturally gravitates toward her. People feel something, a calm gravity. It's the look in her eyes, the pace of her breath, the way she enters a space as if she belongs there without asking permission. Presence isn't loud. It's a silent declaration of self-respect, and those tuned in can't help but feel it. Carl Jung would say that most of what we notice in others isn't what they show consciously, but what leaks from deeper layers within. This is where shadow work becomes powerful for a woman of presence. Instead of pretending she has no fears or insecurities, she has met them face to face. She has learned to sit with the parts of herself she once tried to hide. Her presence feels real because she is real, and authenticity is magnetic. People can sense what she has conquered inside, even if they don't know the details. Think about someone you admire instantly. Maybe you met them once, yet they left a mark on your memory. You might not remember their words, but you remember how you felt around them. That's the unconscious mind recognizing a person who isn't at war with herself. She doesn't scan the room searching for flaws in others, or in herself. She stands tall not to intimidate, but because she no longer shrinks. Presence is emotional truth walking upright. Through shadow work, she no longer abandons the pieces of her story that once embarrassed her. She knows the difference between performing confidence and embodying it. Her boundaries are clear, her values consistent, her tone grounded. She doesn't rush to fill silence, because silence doesn't scare her anymore. When someone tries to test her, she doesn't explode or retreat. She responds from a place of inner clarity. She earned one honest conversation with herself at a time. Her invisible language is built in daily moments. Holding eye contact just half a second longer, speaking with intention instead of apology, breathing through discomfort instead of abandoning herself. Small actions that reshape the soul. And once she discovered that shrinking serves no one, especially not her, she became someone the world couldn't look away from, which leads to a surprising shift that happens when she finally refuses to play small. At first, the shift was subtle. She didn't walk differently. She simply stopped rushing. She didn't speak louder. She spoke with clarity. And even without a single word, something in her aura told the world, I trust myself now. That message went straight to the unconscious mind of everyone around her. People lifted their heads when she passed by. Some looked twice. It wasn't vanity. It was visibility. For the first time, she allowed life to actually see her. It was strange for her, honestly. She wasn't used to being noticed without trying. A stranger held the door for her and waited with a smile. A woman in the elevator complimented her presence. Even friends seemed to pay closer attention, asking for her opinions, seeking her insight. She realized that when she stopped hiding her depth, the world instinctively leaned in closer. Her confidence activated a kind of gravitational field around her, subtle but undeniable. What changed wasn't her appearance, it was her shadow work. There's a different kind of beauty that comes from someone who has embraced the parts of herself she once feared. She didn't wear confidence like a costume, she embodied it. And the body tells the truth better than any words can. The way she stood, the way she breathed, the way she listened, all declared, "I'm no longer negotiating my worth." That declaration made her unforgettable. Instead of asking for permission, she made decisions. Instead of waiting to be chosen, she chose herself first. And surprisingly, that energy opened doors that used to remain shut. People invited her into conversations she once thought she wasn't ready for. They saw leadership in her before she even claimed it. That's the power of the unconscious mind at work. Others believe in you when you start believing in yourself. She also noticed how opportunities seemed to appear out of nowhere, as if life had been waiting for her to show up fully. Coffee shop encounters turned into new connections. A simple message turned into a collaboration. Even her creativity flowed differently. She took risks she once avoided. And every time she stepped into a new space, she felt guided by something bigger, a sense of destiny aligning with courage. But confidence isn't just when things go right. It's how she responds when they don't. Shadow work taught her to breathe through doubt rather than collapse under it. When a plan fell apart or a challenge felt overwhelming, she didn't run back to her old self. She used those moments as training, proof that she could survive discomfort without abandoning her growth. And this resilience made her even more captivating. Of course, every rise comes with a test. Not everyone celebrates the glow of someone who has done their inner work. Attention is sweet, but it also awakens shadows in others. And soon, she discovered that her confidence, the very thing that elevated her, would expose insecurities in those who never dealt with their own. That's when admiration turns into resistance, and the real journey begins. As her presence began to grow, something unexpected happened. Not everyone celebrated it. Some smiled politely while secretly wondering how she dared to evolve without permission. Others recoiled, unsettled, as if her confidence had violated an unspoken social rule. It wasn't malice. It was discomfort. When a woman becomes fully aware of herself, she stirs what others have buried in the unconscious mind. Her light doesn't accuse, it reflects. And for those who still hide from their reflection, that light burns. People who haven't done shadow work often struggle when confronted by someone who has. They can sense, even subconsciously, that her calmness isn't a facade but the product of inner labor. Her peace is evidence of courage they have not yet claimed. In Jungian terms, their reaction isn't personal, it's projection. Her self-possession awakens their disowned selves, the parts they've denied or abandoned. And what the ego cannot integrate, it attacks. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology helps us understand this phenomenon. Researchers examined how women respond to confident, self-assured peers and found something profoundly revealing. When a woman displays presence, assertiveness, or visible self-esteem, it unconsciously triggers what psychologists call a status threat in those who feel less secure about their own lives. The reaction happens beneath awareness, a tightening in the chest, a flash of comparison, a quiet judgment disguised as indifference. Carl Jung predicted this long before the data confirmed it. He taught that what disturbs us in others is often a mirror of what lies unresolved within ourselves. The study simply gave scientific language to what Jung called the shadow, those denied aspects of the psyche that rise to the surface when illuminated by someone else's authenticity. In the modern world, that illumination often looks like envy, criticism, or the subtle withdrawal of affection. You've seen it, haven't you? The friend who suddenly grows distant after your promotion. The colleague who minimizes your idea with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. The relative who tells you not to get ahead of yourself. They are not reacting to who you are now. They are reacting to the parts of themselves that never dared to become that. Her success exposes their stagnation, and the pain of that realization is often unbearable. So they reject the mirror instead of facing the image within it. The woman of presence, however, has learned to read these reactions through the lens of empathy rather than bitterness. Shadow work taught her to discern between her worth and their wounds. She knows that what others project says more about their inner battles than her behavior. She no longer takes their discomfort as a sign she should shrink. Instead, she lets it remind her that she has outgrown the need to be understood by everyone. The less she explains herself, the freer she becomes. And yet, there are moments when she still wonders why her joy seems to bother others, why her quiet confidence is met with coldness. Then she remembers Jung's timeless truth. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Their hostility isn't fate. It's fear wearing confidence as camouflage. Fear of confronting their unfulfilled potential. Fear of what they might have to change if they admitted they want more. The same study revealed another layer that Jung would have loved. Women who focused on self-alignment, living by internal values rather than external approval, reported higher well-being and more authentic relationships. It's as if the more you integrate your shadow, the less you need validation to feel alive. Presence, then, isn't about commanding attention, it's about embodying wholeness. And wholeness is magnetic precisely because it's rare. Over time, she began to see the pattern clearly. The people who reacted with jealousy weren't evil. They were uninitiated. They hadn't yet crossed the threshold into self-awareness. And her light, steady and unapologetic, became both a threat and an invitation. For some, it triggered envy. For others, admiration. Both were the same reaction, the psyche awakening to its own unrealized potential. In this way, her presence is alchemy. It turns the unseen into the seen. It brings the unconscious to the surface not only within her but in everyone she encounters. That's why some people can't stand her, and others can't stop thinking about her. She is both mirror and catalyst, a living embodiment of what Jung described as the tension of opposites, the point where discomfort becomes transformation. And as she walks through the world now, she does so with quiet understanding. She knows that the reactions she provokes are not a measure of her worth, but of her impact. Some will fear her because she reminds them of their own untapped power. Others will follow her, drawn by the permission her authenticity gives them to evolve. Either way, she no longer needs to please. Presence has made her unshakable. But here lies the paradox that few truly grasp. The more she heals, the softer she becomes, and yet, the more unbreakable her presence turns. That softness isn't weakness. It's mastery. And soon, she will discover that the gentlest energy on earth can also be the most powerful. The next revelation waiting quietly in her story. What fascinates people most about her isn't just her strength. It's what it coexists with. She is gentle. Her voice is calm, her steps measured, her heart empathetic. And that softness makes some underestimate her, until they discover a backbone made of iron. This is the paradox she embodies. The woman who cares deeply, but won't collapse to earn love. Her softness invites you in, but her boundaries remind you that entering her life is a privilege, not a right. Real queens have walked this path before her. Princess Diana, Lady Di, was called dramatic, emotional, too sensitive. They mocked her tears, but ignored the courage it took to feel so deeply in a world that thrives on emotional numbness. She saw humans where others saw headlines. She knelt on the floor of hospitals, hugged people everyone else avoided, and challenged fear with pure compassion. And behind her kindness lived a woman quietly battling her own shadows, loneliness, rejection, betrayal. Her strength wasn't in pretending she was unbreakable. It was in continuing to love while repairing her heart. They said she wasn't fit to rule, and she proved she was born to serve humanity. It was Lady Di who walked through an active minefield wearing only a vest, not because she was reckless, but because she refused to let fear dictate the limits of empathy. Her softness started revolutions, changing conversations about AIDS, landmines, and vulnerable children around the world. Even after they tried to silence her voice, her legacy became louder. The world realized that sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who leads with kindness. And then there's Katherine Johnson, the brilliant mathematician at NASA whose calculations helped launch the first Americans into space. She didn't shout to be heard. She simply refused to disappear. In a time when both her race and gender were used as excuses to deny her potential, she confronted barriers with intelligence so undeniable that the universe itself became her witness. She stood in rooms where no one expected her to stand, and solved equations no one else dared to attempt. Her courage lived in the choices she made daily, to show up, to think boldly, to remain gracious in the face of prejudice. Catherine's strength wasn't loud, but it changed the trajectory of history, literally. And her softness? It was a secret resilience. In her kindness, she preserved her joy. In her humility, she preserved her dignity. She didn't need to harden to survive. Her brilliance made space for her, and for countless women who would follow. Her story teaches us that healing the insecurities buried in the unconscious mind, confronting them through what we now call shadow work, is how a woman rises without begging anyone to let her rise. These women were once labeled as too emotional, too ambitious, too different. They were misunderstood, resisted, criticized. But history proves what the world forgot. Revolutions are often led by women who were brave enough to remain soft while becoming unshakably strong. And the woman of presence, our heroine, carries their legacy in her own evolution. She, too, is learning that her openness doesn't make her fragile, it makes her formidable. And the rituals she practices every day, they are the fire that keeps her presence burning brighter, ready to shape the world in ways others can't yet see. Every morning, before the world decides who she is allowed to be, she claims herself first. Women of presence rise slowly, not because they are fragile, but because they are deliberate. She breathes in deeply, recognizing that the first voice she hears should be her own, not society's. This single breath sends a powerful message to the unconscious mind. I belong here. She doesn't reach for her phone. She reaches for herself. There is a difference. Awareness becomes her anchor. She sits with her thoughts, not to judge them, but to understand the story they are trying to tell. Shadow work is part of this ritual. She names her fears, her doubts, the parts of herself she once hid. She doesn't push them away. She listens, because she knows presence doesn't come from perfection, it comes from truth. And nothing is more magnetic than a woman who is whole inside her own skin. Movement turns her body into a temple of expression rather than a battlefield of criticism. A walk outside, sunlight warming her cheeks. A slow stretch reminding her that she is human, flexible, adaptable, alive. Sometimes she dances like no one is watching, because this time she isn't performing. She is reconnecting. Jung wrote that what we neglect within becomes our fate. She refuses neglect. She chooses embodiment, letting her body remember joy. She also sets boundaries as part of her daily hygiene. Like brushing her teeth, protecting her peace becomes a non-negotiable ritual. She chooses carefully who gets access to her energy. Not everyone deserves a seat at her table. She has learned through experience that a peaceful life is a result of intentional choices, not luck. When she says no, she is saying yes to her purpose, and purpose is presence in motion. Her environment reflects her inner evolution. She keeps symbols that remind her of who she is becoming, quotes on a wall, a candle that carries the scent of calm, music that awakens something ancient inside her. These are not decorations, they are allies. They feed her self-image so the world cannot starve it. She is curating a reality where confidence feels like home rather than a costume. Throughout the day, she practices micro-moments of power. A longer stride. Eye contact held for one more heartbeat. Her name spoken with clarity. Silence embraced without fear. These subtle behaviors inform the unconscious mind that she no longer abandons herself. And others feel this. Presence is not a performance. It's alignment repeated until it becomes instinct. At night, she doesn't count her failures. She counts her returns. How many times did she come back to herself today? How many times did she choose love instead of fear? She thanks her younger self for surviving and her current self for rising. Gratitude becomes the thread stitching her story toward wholeness. She knows growth is not always loud. Some days, the bravest thing she does is simply not shrink. Some days, she stares her inner critic in the eye and says, "Not today." And some days, she glows, effortlessly, because her past self planted the seeds for that moment long ago. That's the power of consistency. Her rituals are not about becoming a new woman. They are about remembering the ancient power already living inside her. Jung called it the self, the inner voice that knows exactly who she is. When she listens to that voice daily, something incredible happens. Her presence arrives before she does. So she wakes again the next morning with courage and softness intertwined, ready to step into a world that may never fully understand her, but will always feel her. Because a woman who chooses herself daily becomes impossible, absolutely impossible, to ignore. So now tell me, what would happen if you finally trusted the woman you've been becoming in silence? What if instead of doubting your reflection, you started seeing the divine design behind every scar, every lesson, every shadow you've survived? Self-awareness isn't about changing who you are. It's about unlearning who the world told you to be. Imagine looking in the mirror and recognizing not just a face, but a story of resilience that refused to quit. Presence begins the moment you stop running from yourself. When you look into your own eyes and say, "I choose me, fully." Can you imagine the freedom in that? To no longer ask for permission to feel proud of your journey. To stop apologizing for being intense, passionate, different, whole. True acceptance isn't passive. It's an active inner revolution. It's you saying, "My depth isn't a burden, it's my superpower." Every woman has a shadow, fears, insecurities, memories she hides even from herself. Carl Jung called these the forgotten parts of the psyche, stored in the unconscious mind. But here's the secret. Your presence becomes unforgettable the moment you stop fearing those shadows and begin integrating them. Because the parts of you that once made you feel too much are exactly the parts that make you magnetic now. Think about it. Your sensitivity is the reason you can feel what others overlook. Your intensity is the reason you pursue what others give up on. Your past pain is the reason you love deeper and fight harder. Everything someone tried to use against you is precisely what prepares you to rise. Shadow work transforms wounds into wisdom, and wisdom is the most powerful presence a woman can carry. So, let me ask you, which parts of you are ready to come home? Which dreams are you done postponing? Which version of yourself will finally have a voice tomorrow morning? Comment below and declare it. When you name your transformation, you accelerate it. And your words here might be exactly the sign another woman needs to reclaim herself too. You deserve to see how unstoppable you become when you stop shrinking and start showing up, not as a fragment, but as your whole self. Let this be the moment you look back on and say, "That's when everything changed. That's when I finally chose me." And if this message stirred even a tiny spark inside you, don't let it fade. Nurture it. Feed it. Return to it. Stay with us. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because your inner awakening has only begun. And trust me, the world is already preparing to make space for the woman you are about to become.